Let's see, hold on a second. There we go. All right, so when we talk about changes, multiple changes happening at the same time, this is normal, right? There's a lot of change that happens at companies because, you know, companies are responding to different things happening in the world. And the recent pressure has been pretty big for really everyone. Now it's different, it's unique for each company, for each person, but these are the themes that a lot of folks have been dealing with, right? Working from home happened immediately, then back to the office, hybrid. Digital transformation has been reactive because we need to be able to digitally collaborate now. So that was change. New colleagues with the great resignation, there's been a great reshuffle, and often what comes with that is new colleagues, even if you haven't made a move to a new job. And then also new managers. And again, with that, evolving with new managers, new colleagues, your role is evolving and your responsibility is evolving. So these are some recent pressures that people have been expressing last couple of years. But then, of course, companies respond to risk and opportunity all the time, right? So they are trying to figure out, okay, how do we take advantage of this? And what that results in is a lot of change for everyone at the same time. And sequencing is not really a consideration oftentimes. So, that's great. It's good to know that this is what's happening and it's normal. It was normal before. It's definitely normal now. So what do you do with all of that? So we're going to talk pretty practically today about some things that you can do. And we have two things that we're going to cover today, which is creating a team roadmap and then starting a simple team prioritization practice. And the way I would think about this is, how do you get yourself set up and ready to basically respond? The thing that Ed and I like to talk about is almost like you're in an emergency room, right? You're a doctor in an emergency room. You've been highly trained. Do you have your tools? Do you have your equipment? And if those things are available, if your team is ready, generally speaking, you can pretty much handle anything. So these are suggestions for sort of like tools and equipment and getting your team ready to handle that, that change, whatever it is. It's what your brain is able to do no matter what, right? You're very smart. So setting yourself up well so that you can do this well is the idea.
Yeah, and part of this, comes from a piloting background that I have. So in thinking about an emergency or some problem coming up, having prepped ahead of time and thought your way through what you want to do and have that kind of basic plan makes it so much easier to be able to take care of whatever that problem is. And so this is how we think about these structures: is they're not full-on solutions, they're preparatory measures. So you're still going to have to make things happen in the moment, but this is the stuff that gets you ready to be able to go do that even better with your team.
Yeah, and if you have things like this, you might even enjoy it, right? The challenge of it. And you might feel like, okay, it's not completely out of control. So let's go into the roadmap piece. So the roadmap piece is really two things: asking a lot of questions so you can do some light analysis, and then building a visual. And change professionals do this all the time, but usually for a change initiative or a change project, right? They do an impact assessment. They try to understand the impact of the change to people, and then develop a strategy for making it easier for the business and the people to make the transition the company has in mind. So this is like repurposing that, but at the team level. This can also be useful at the division level. So we'll get into that a little bit. So the analysis, you can see here, there are a lot of questions, but don't worry about all these questions. There is a blog post that we'll share with you that goes into all of these questions, that lists all of these, as well as the approach you can take to create this. Roadmap. So the idea is to, get a clue about, what is changing and how big a deal is it for you and the team. That's in essence what these questions are driving at. Now, you won't be able to get the answers to all these questions, and that's okay. The idea is to tune in, try to get a sense of what this is and how your team is impacted. That's the idea. And then once you have that, you can start to figure out, okay, well, what is the timing for these changes? And what are the dependencies? What do I need to, where do I need to plug in to get information so that when things, new things are decided or new things come to light, I can understand the nature of the impact a little bit better, or even the answers to some of these questions a little bit more. And from here, you can start to build your roadmap. So this question number 5 is a really great question to ask. What am I empowered to decide to implement the change, right? It's good to know what your decision rights are in this change context. Just questions like understanding who am I leading this change with, and how will we know that we're making progress? You know, these are really good questions just to sort of pose and see what kind of answers you get to these questions. Again, because it'll tell you a lot about what you know and what you don't know and how to manage it well with your team.
Yeah, and that interplay too between change and decision, that's important to us, which you might have guessed from the name of the company.
Right.
And so thinking about how that really works together, we see everything as both of those. So one coin with two sides, decisions and change, and almost a constant back and forth between what do you need to do. You make your first decision and then you go implement the change. Then you got decisions about the change.
Right.
You make those decisions and then you go set up each piece of those. And those questions are helping you to get smarter about how to handle it. And that may sound obvious, but as I'm sure all of you know, and it's certainly true in our experience, people don't do it, right? And for a bunch of good reasons, right? They're rushed and they're trying to get to the next thing. You have so much to do. You're trying to pull it all together that it can be difficult to make that happen. But that is a good place to slow down in order to be able to go faster later.
Right, right. So you'll see here what we brought up is a roadmap visual. The idea here is for you to try to get an understanding of, you know, what is the impact to people. Now you can do the level of effort piece, right? Like how many hours, or kind of estimate the workload using something like this. But what this is intending to do is to understand the emotional and mental effort that people will perceive, like those people who are impacted, who must do something differently. It's another lens to look through because that is going to matter, right? You'll need to, when you look at it in aggregate like this, you can start to see, okay, well, it looks like my team is going to need a little bit more help with this particular change in September and October. So what might I do in August to help with that? Or is there anything I can go and negotiate with someone else to try to figure out how to reduce that? And you can see at, you know, we can look at an entire month and see how your team is going to be impacted by a set of changes that are happening. This tool is meant to be something for you as a leader, but also something you can use with your team to discuss, you know, what do they see? What you're assessing the impact, but you're asking them to help you understand, you know, are you getting this right? Or is there anything else that they see that you don't see? And then this also helps you with negotiating with, say, your manager, or say people who are implementing change, so that you can sort of negotiate what is reasonable for you and your team to take on. And then the other thing you can talk about, you can use this tool with is for trade-offs. So say you're looking to make some priorities, you know, decide what is important and what isn't important. You can work with your manager to figure out, you know, how do I prioritize amongst these changes when push comes to shove? Or, you know, you can talk to mentors, you can talk to peers, you can talk to advisors to show them the things that you are thinking about and concerned about, and the trade-offs that you're looking at, and see what they might have to offer as thought partners for you.
Yeah, and there's a I think a really important subtlety here, because I want to highlight it because it was important for me. So some of these ideas here for us roll back a long time. At one point, Roxanne and I were both working for a big company, and I was leading a bunch of these efforts, and she was the change practitioner doing that part, leading the change parts of this. And before we started working together, when people would come to talk to me about these things, I almost always rejected them. And for a couple of reasons. One, when people first they want to talk about change resistance and let's count up how many hours and look how tired out everybody is. And in my head, it's like, I don't get to choose that, right? Other people have told me we're going to go do these things. I don't have the opportunity to stop doing them. And besides, I'm expecting the project manager to go figure those hours out and figure out if we've got time to go do all of these things. What Roxanne was bringing in here is the emotional impact of that, and where would people get worn down as a result of whatever big efforts were happening in the pile of those, not in aggregate, but in the specific, like where are the hard things happening, and are the hard things happening for 3 changes that are going on simultaneously at the same time, or are they spread out? Because if they're spread out, then I feel good that my team can handle them. But if they're spiking at particular spots, well, okay, that makes sense that we need to pay attention to that. And then communicate and train and interact and engage with the team differently. And this was really the first time that somebody had come to me with that before. And so now when I hear change practitioners talk about change fatigue and how do we handle it, I think it's this. I think it's, work with the leaders on this, and how, to the extent that you can either change the timing or change your efforts so that you are really thinking about what is the impact of people. And it's not about hours, because that certainly has value and it's worth paying attention to, but there are others that are doing that. Some of that may be not movable because of the nature of the projects, but what you do in response to that and how that engages the team is significant. It certainly was for us, and that was an eye-opener for me. So I'm going to offer that to you from the point of view of somebody who said mean things about these kinds of things before. And until I got it to this point where I could understand how to use it, then it became a really valuable tool for me as a program leader.
Right. So this is very simply the roadmap visual. Again, it's just helps you get a clue about the nature of the changes in aggregate in terms of their impact to your team. And you can see we put up in the corner this, you can do this by person, right? Maybe you want to drill down to like all the different individuals on your team, or you could do this as a group, or how does it impact the team overall, or as a division. It's also useful for that. And again, just a reminder, we'll be sharing the blog post with you at the end that walks you through how to create something like this and the questions to ask. So that's the first thing we would recommend you do, is create a team visual, a team roadmap.
This second part then is like, how do we think about prioritization? And so we want to do this really in 2 levels. We're going to give you a very direct piece, which you may have seen before, but we're going to cast it hopefully in a slightly different context than maybe you've seen. And then we're going to broaden out to a different way to think about it. So let's zoom in first. One of the places that we see lack of engagement happening is when members of a team don't feel like they have autonomy to go do something. They don't know what their decision rights are. That might be kind of a wonky way to say it, but what do I get to decide and what don't I get to decide? And one of the things that could be useful is to use this matrix. So somewhat famously, General President Eisenhower used this as his matrix, and he would split everything into these 4 buckets. Is it urgent or not urgent? And is it important or not important? And yeah, you're gonna have to come up with your own way to measure those, but even a gut feel can be useful. So if it's important and it's urgent, then that's a number 1, you do it, right? You're the one that needs to jump in and go make that happen. So the probably things that are going to have a clear deadline, and something clearly bad if it doesn't happen, and something clearly good if it does. And so that makes sense for you to go do. If it's not urgent, but still important, then don't do it now, but schedule it, right? So these are going to be things that don't really have a deadline. So you can get them done and you don't have to worry about a particular time. It can make it easier to procrastinate, so you got to watch for that. But that shouldn't be things that are going to overwhelm the others that do have a deadline. And so it may be smart to actually procrastinate on, because you don't want to get to it right away. And then if it's not important, but it's still urgent, then delegate it. And this is going to get into another concept around how leaders can provide a form, we call it a bubble, that they can put around their teams to help them to understand what they can do. And one of the things to think about is, what are you delegating down to them? Here's an easy way to think about it. And then lastly, if it's not urgent and not important, you probably don't do it, delete it, get rid of it. And these are kinds of things that are often end up as distractions from the stress of doing the work, right? So you decide to go do this because you're stressed out about all the other things. So I'm going to go do this not important, not urgent thing right now because I get a relief from it. So we get that. And so it may be valuable to keep some of those things in there in order to do that, but be careful with it, because that's the junk that gets in the way. And suddenly it's lunchtime and you haven't gotten any of the urgent or important things done, right? Because that's what can get in the way of making that kind of stuff happen. So this basic matrix is an easy way to start to put all that together. And it's been used by lots of people and certainly isn't something that we have come up with, but we do find it to be valuable. So it's a simple way to think about it. So that's a zoom in. Let's zoom back out now and think about what is the broader way to kind of pull all this together. And so we think about it as decision questions, right? So you're the leader and you're trying to think about, how can I give guidance or boundaries around the people on my team so that they can make decisions? This is the setup now for the delegate part that we just looked at. What decisions can be catastrophic? All right, well, maybe you want to hold on to those, right? You don't want to delegate out a decision that can be catastrophic to the team, project, company. You should be the one taking that on. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't engage your team. You should, but you don't give them the decision right. You maintain the decision right. Is there a history? So has the team decided these before? That could give you a good idea of how this comes together. Is there something that if they make a decision and fail, they could learn from it? This is tricky, but unbelievably powerful. I'll just give you a quick, small story around this. So I was working with a group and they were working through a process that I clearly saw was going to fail. And they felt for sure that it was going to be okay. Like that, no, we'll be able to make the deadline. I'm like, there's no way you're going to make the deadline. But failure in this case was not going to be significantly impactful. It would have an impact. It would hurt, but it wasn't going to crush the project. It wasn't going to stop us from making ultimate progress. And so I actually talked to the leader of the this section of the company in which we were working and told her, this is going to fail. And she's like, oh, well, we should go fix it. I'm like, no, I think we shouldn't actually. We should let them fail because there's a good learning opportunity in here. And you learn through failure, right? That happened all the way back in second grade when you were working on your spelling test and somebody tells you where you get something wrong and where you get it right. You fail and learn. And this is an opportunity here too. And I think this is a place where leaders often make a big mistake in trying to prevent all failures. You want to prevent the nasty, catastrophic ones for sure, and find a place where it's okay for some of those failures to occur. This is this idea of a leadership bubble. So can you create a bubble around each person on the team and allow them to be able to make failures inside the bubble? So anything they do in there, they can fail and recover. Things outside the bubble, they can't. So you're trying to adjust the size of this bubble back and forth. And so we have a blog post about that as well. And you can take a look at it here and get a little bit more information about that. But it really comes down to, what are everyone's decision rights? So what do I get to decide? What do the people on my team get to decide? And then what does the leader get to decide? And being clear about all of those and setting those up can be really important for allowing engagement, because people want autonomy. They want to know what it is that they get to do. And they also want to be clear on what they don't do and have to work with others on or work with a leader on in order to make happen. And this is a way to get clear about that and to start to set those up so that folks can really understand what it is that they can do. And what you'll find is that stuff gets done better and faster, but people grow as well. It's a development opportunity for them because they get a chance to be in there and to have some successes, then have some failures that aren't harming them, the company, the group, the team. And as a result, they get to move forward, which is, I think, a wonderful way to go.
So You may be wondering, what does this have to do with team and employee engagement? Well, we have touched on some of that. But one of the things that we wanted to share is what teams need during change. They definitely need a shared vision, purpose, and goals, and they need that anyway. We call that out here because if the team doesn't have a shared vision, purpose, and goals, that could be something that ends up being a problem. Maybe they don't feel so much like a team. So anyway, it's just something to, think about. And, does the team have this? Then they also need a way to evaluate the change impact. So doing that visual, that roadmap is a way to, is a tool to have that kind of discussion. Information flow inside and outside the team, that's about, are they plugged in? Are they plugged into information sources that are going to keep them up to date with the information they need to succeed? And then is there good flow inside the team so that everyone feels like they're being kept informed so that they can succeed, right? Everybody needs information in order to do their job well. Understanding of decision rights, which Ed just talked about, and then trust and strong relationships that are ready to handle stress, right? So the idea is we've talked about this before, the idea of building trusting relationships over time builds emotional capital. It builds that ability to handle very difficult things and even thrive in difficult situations. Now, employees need all that, plus they need a balance of team collaboration and focus time. And this is something that I've been reading a lot about recently. With all the articles about burnout lately, there's been a lot of studies about, what do we do about burnout? And there's also been a lot of advice out there. And I wanted to share with you a couple of things that I found. One of the things that I found was a Microsoft study. They are studying employee thriving rather than employee engagement. And it means to them to be energized and empowered to do meaningful work. So thought this was really fascinating. They did the study by combining, one of the things they did is combine the data with de-identified calendar and email metadata. They found that people who are happier if they had 5 fewer hours in their work span, so that has to do with work-life balance, which we're all familiar with, 5 fewer collaboration hours and 3 more focus hours, and 17 fewer employees in their internal network size, which is really interesting. It is about focus time. This is about, do I have enough time to do my work? And collaboration, while good, is important, can get in the way of that. And I'm sure all of us have been through the experience of having a day where it's just back-to-back meetings, or maybe that's your entire work life. You don't get much focus time. Well, that's not a recipe for thriving, is the results, or according to this study. So there's something about focus time. And then on the collaboration side, other really interesting things. Deloitte Workplace Intelligence Study found that 24% of people are lonely, or we're in this, a lot of folks are in this working from home or hybrid situation. They don't feel the connections they used to feel, and it's resulting in less investment in each other's success. People in the Better Up study, 69% are dissatisfied with their amount of social connection. So what this speaks to is belonging. Do I feel a sense of belonging with my team? Do I feel a sense of belonging with my company? That is something that people want. So they want both. They want to focus and get some creative work done. And they also want to be connected. They need both. So it's how do you balance both of those things? So, and one of the things that we do a lot is team engagement surveys, which is different from employee engagement. So we thought we would share the questions that we use often in those kinds of surveys. So you can see the first couple are about information, right? Am I getting the information that I need from others to succeed? And am I able to give others the information they need from me to succeed, right? The idea is that I understand that there's this interaction that is important, and it also assumes that I understand what their role is, right? And, that takes some effort, doesn't automatically happen. You hear a lot about, we need clear roles and responsibilities, right? That's often a refrain folks will make. So these two are about understanding the roles of others and that people understand your role. And then there's evaluating risks, right? Do they understand how the process for evaluating team risks, and do they feel comfortable raising them? Do they feel comfortable to have folks jump in and help them without concern for, there's some sort of hidden agenda with that offer of help? Do I feel respected and appreciated? Do I feel comfortable expressing my appreciation for others? And that Uber question, which is, I'm proud to be a member of the team. So you can see these questions are really about teaming. They're not really about me as an individual. They're much more about teaming. And the answers to these questions tell us a lot about where we need to focus, right? Where we need to spend a little time. If people don't know the process for evaluating team risks, oh my goodness, we need to communicate that. Or maybe we need to develop it in some way, right? So, and if people know it, but they don't feel comfortable, okay, well, let's dive into that a little bit more. What is that? This can go a little bit on the extreme. Maybe people are raising risks all the time. So maybe you need to reframe that question to be, to address the idea of providing suggestions or making sure that the risk that people raise is balanced, right? It's not, the sky is falling and it's not underplayed. So again, you can go a little bit deeper with these questions depending on what the situation is. But we offer these as sort of a counterpoint to, okay, you've got these two things that you can do to manage a lot of change. And then you can use questions like this as a sign for you about whether or not it's working. So these speak to the joy philosophies that we talk about all the time, right? So when change is happening, the idea of leading change intentionally is a gesture of respect. And when you think about everybody needing to be treated with respect, including yourself, it makes it easier to understand what to do. Everyone's point of view is valid, even if I disagree or don't understand it. That's about getting into an empathetic, curious first mindset rather than judgment first, which we're trained to be very judgmental at work to solve problems. So this is about turning that on its head a bit. And then, of course, before change can happen, leader must change first. So if you're a leader, this is definitely a message for you. And if you are a change professional or a program manager, all of this, of course, pertains to you as well. But one thing I wanted to call out is if you are a change practitioner or a program manager and you have a program team or a project team or an agile team or some sort of team that's working together on a project, you can apply all of this to them as well, right? Because if morale is good on that team, it makes it much more likely they will produce something that the people on the receiving end that will need to use will like it. They'll feel like it's made for them. So it's paying attention to your project team's morale is really huge. I cannot emphasize that enough. So again, going back to the top line, so what to do, we suggest creating a team roadmap for change. And again, you can bring us at the team level or the division level, and then creating a simple prioritization practice using the questions that Ed talked about. So we know, we've said this a bunch of times, the opportunity to grow joy at work is available every time you change. Just what Ed said at the beginning, every time you implement change, you're impacting joy at work, and the change is actually impacted by the amount of joy at work that already exists. So paying attention to both, you can have an upward spiral rather than a downward spiral. So this is the blog post that we wanted to share. This is change, overload and joy. I want to say overlord. That's not good.
That's okay. Overload and joy.
Change, overload and joy. Just having a problem there. Anyway, so if you can use this QR code to get the details on what we have been talking about. And that's what we wanted to share.
Yeah, so thanks everyone. This is glad to have everybody here, and glad that you're joining us for all of this. We've just got a couple more things to let you know about. So one of the things that was important with this whole process is this idea of setting an intention. And we've talked about this in other webinars that we've done. And this is kind of the lead in to the whole idea of team engagement, is you have to have an intention for them about how to do it. So we put together this mini course, and you can get to it off of the QR code or just go straight to our website to find it. And it'll really clarify what you want out of any sort of a change that's going to be happening, and then be able to really drive your decisions off of that intention. But by getting clear about it, and then we give you a process for sharing that with the team that you're working with, you'll have a significantly better effort as a result of that. And it's going to be really useful for you. So next, our next webinar coming up is going to be about metrics. And so this is one of the ones that we have done before, and we've done a pretty big redo, because we've gotten a bunch of feedback from our clients that Roxanne and I are consulting with as we're implementing this. And so we've changed some of the language and changed some of the tools in order to help. So that'll be at the end of August on Thursday. So please join us for that. And with that, I think we'll just say thanks. And here is how to contact us. And if folks got questions, you want to put something in the chat right now, that's great. If you want to send us an email, we're always happy to hear what people have to say, and try and answer any questions if we got them. So that's it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us and spending some time, your lunchtime, for those of you on the East Coast with us. And with that, we'll say thanks. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.